Welcome everybody to our workshop Tuesday, July 16th, 2024, 5 o'clock, a little after. Call to order. Item B, declaration of a quorum, 6 members present, 1 absent, possibly on the way. Welcome everybody, thanks for being here. Item C, hearing of citizens. I don't believe we have any for this meeting. Item D, consideration of discussion regarding the 24-25 budget and compensation. Ms. Wilson.
I was just waiting for it. Yes, sorry about that. I'm learning new. Welcome board, Dr. Harkrider. I appreciate being able to speak with you guys tonight. I'm excited that you've given me the opportunity to work for College Station ISD. If you ask some of my board members, something that they'll say about me is I love accounting, and I think it can be fun. So hopefully you guys love accounting as well. We're going to start off with the compensation plan. When I look at a compensation plan, I think there are 3 things that we really need to consider. It's competition, cost, and sustainability. And those are the things that I really think we want to look at when we're looking at a compensation plan. Some great things that are happening here at College Station ISD. I'm sorry, I did that twice. When I was doing some research on College Station, a couple things that really showed about our district is our teacher turnover. And I think that's one thing that we want to give a shout out to our administrators and our teachers that are doing great things. We are winning the race there, 18.8% turnover in College Station ISD. These are our comparative districts. When we look at districts and try to figure out where we want to make sure we're competitive with, these are the districts we're looking at. So one thing that we want to take into consideration is that 18.8%, and our teachers are staying here at College Station ISD. The next thing we want to look at is how much we pay for compensation. One thing I would like to point out is College Station, out of all of our peer districts, are paying the most towards employee health care. So employee-only health care, we pay $476 a month. Per the state, we're required to pay $225 of that per month. However, our district is paying $476. If you want to look just a little bit further, employee plus family, our district is paying $509 on those comparative districts, and you can kind of look how that means there. So I think that's a very positive that we can take. When you look at the makeup of our school district, I kind of want to point out a few things. 50% of our teachers are 0 to 10 years, and so we want to make sure we're competitive across the board, but I wanted to at least give you an idea of where we stand. 27% of the additional teachers are 11 to 20 years, and so that's kind of where our population is. If you look at the makeup of our total staff, 50% of our total staff are teachers, librarians, and nurses. You've got another and 19% in auxiliary. That's your bus drivers. That's everybody that handles your day-to-day operations of the district outside of the classroom. Your clerical professionals, 20%. 11% administrative professionals. That's across the board. That's your principals, and that's your administrative staff as well. And then if you want to look at first-year teacher salary in our comparative districts, and when we pull up these comparison districts, we're really looking at the districts that are kind of in our area. And so you're very familiar where these cities are, but you can kind of see we're $51,000 for starting pay. You can kind of look at the other ones, Tomball and New Caney. They're a little bit closer to the Metroplex than us, and so that's going to pull their salaries a little bit higher than what you see for College Station. And then I wanted to just put into that number, if you add the benefits that we pay addition higher than our other peer districts, you're kind of get that number pulled up a little bit higher. And then we take a bigger spread from our peer districts. So those are some things I wanted to talk to you about on the comparison districts. But then if you also look here, we're kind of sitting a little bit lower than medium, with a 0 years, 51,000, 5 years, 52,250, and you can kind of see how that weighs up. So we're really kind of pretty competitive with that 0 to 10 year salary. And then as we look in the future for the next budget cycle, I think especially if we get an increase in basic allotment. How the law currently reads is 30% of increased basic allotment has to be spent on staff. And then when they narrow it down for teaching staff, they say a majority of that or a higher percentage of that has to be spent on the older teachers or the more veteran teachers. And so you can kind of see where we could take some of that funding and place it and kind of help us pull us up into more competitive with our peer districts at that time. So we presented these 3 plans last month, and I kind of pared it down on actual cost to the district. And so I'm looking at 3 plans that were pretty well presented last month. We're looking at a 1.5% and a 2% raise that would start our teaching salary, our first 0-year teachers at $51,750. There were 51,000 last year. That's a 2% of midpoint. That gives a $1,200 increase to all of our teaching staff across the board. 1.5% of midpoint for admin, 2% for midpoint for paraprofessionals, and 2% for auxiliary. The difference there is bus drivers is we're going to have to move the bus driver rate up to be a little bit more competitive in our area. And when we do that, because we're set on tables, if we move that starting pay up and you've got a lot of people on the beginning end of that, and I counted about 20 bus drivers are between 1 and 3 years of experience, and so we're going to need to move them off the starting pay a little bit, and then that'll get them a little bit higher than someone that's coming in brand new without experience. So, and then if you look at Plan B, pretty well the same thing. The only difference there is we'd go ahead and give the administrators the 2% raise as well. That's a little over $100,000 difference between Plan A and Plan B. Plan C is a 1.5% across the board, and the only difference is I'm sorry, that's 1.5% across the board, and yes, I did not change that on that PowerPoint, but that's what I meant it to say. If you want the breakdown between the categories, this is a little bit of the breakdown between the categories for the raises. It's your raise, and then there's a little bit figured in there for your benefit increases. And then I kind of wanted to talk about sustainability. That was another thing we wanted to talk about. And so this is the budget that Amy presented in the last board meeting. And so when you look at the $4.3 million increase, you can kind of look across the board. We know ESSER funds are going away, and we know that those are going to have to be moved into the general fund. So that's going to be a huge increase for our school district this year. We had a few staffing increases when we added additional positions. We did increase how much we're paying into the employees' health care, so that was the additional cost there. $306,000 is estimated for safety and security, and basically that is just taking us into that state compliance that we're hitting with secured officers on each campus and things like that. So that would be the increase. And then the other inflationary increase, like we're having to estimate 15% increase right now on property and casualty, and so you can kind of see some of those numbers coming in. With those numbers, we're going to fine tune those numbers. In the next little bit, we'll start getting actual numbers in, and we're going to be able to replace the estimates with actuals, and we'll be able to fine tune that. When you look at the reductions, there was a lot of reductions in staffing where we thought that we could reduce, and so you can see those numbers there. When I said, it's kind of funny because I said we're going to push ESSER funds back into the general fund, but then you see a $1.3 million there in savings. That's because they allowed us to pull those over into September. We're going to be able to hit a lot of software programs and things like that right off the get-go in September to kind of relieve some funding for the 24-25 budget. And then we had a 7% decrease a lot in the allotments that were given out to the campuses. And so you can kind of see overall, you're looking at the $4 million deficit there. Okay, that's before we add in raises. So if you kind of want to look at the 3 plans, you've got Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, and you can kind of look at what that does to our deficit. Now, I built this is all built on a 12-month. And the reason why I did that is when you look at the deficit and you roll in a 10-month budget, we're going to be better off, and we're not going to see a deficit at the end of this year. But we've got to be very mindful if the legislation does not step up and help our school district, we're going to be assuming the full amount in the next school year. And so right now, Amy estimated $8 to $10 million savings if we go to the 10-month, and so that would cover the cost that you see here. But for sustainability, I wanted you to see what the bottom line would be with a 12-month budget. Okay, another thing we have to think about when we're setting raises and we're looking at fund balance is what our board policy says. So this is actually CE local in our board policy, and it says we have to have near 3 months operating expenditures in our assigned and unassigned fund balance. So you're going to see me next month kind of bring in a request to move some committed fund balances into unassigned fund balances that we've set aside, and that's to get us in compliance with this 3-month operating. So we're getting really close to a 3-month operating in our fund balance, and so we want to keep that in mind as we go forward. So this is just a historical information of our fund balance, and you can kind of see right now at the end of 2023, we ended the fiscal year with 39 million in fund balance. And so that's a really great, a little over 3 months operating cost. But as we look at these deficit budgets, we just need to keep that in mind, as well as what our board policy requires us to take to be able to cover. So I kind of wanted to bring us back to the 3 options and see if there are any questions or concerns that you might have for me, or what we could answer.
It was fast. I need a little minute to, and there were some new things in there, which I really appreciate. I love the upfront stuff about, where we compare with compensation and such is, and retention is great. I need to go back a little to some of the middle slides, though.
Okay.
One of the things I liked also, the breakdown of how many people we have in each of those different buckets, because we are talking about potentially giving different compensation for different groups, and make sure I understand who is in each of these. Because I think the numbers changed a little bit from last time too, as how much the difference between a 1.5 and a 2%
It did.
would be.
So when Amy was looking at it, she was going to give different amounts to different teacher grade population. So like a 5-year teacher might get a little bit more than a 20-year teacher, but I really wanted it to be consistent across the board, so that we were going to give 1,000, 1%, or 1,200. Because if you look at the spread again, where we have 0 to 10 years, we're kind of competitive in that area. It's where we kind of lose some of the competition is in the other one. So I wanted to be consistent across the board. So yes, they did change a little bit.
And then does this align with the buckets on the other, the other breakout of the percentage raises? Are these the exact same buckets? 50% of our folks are in that first line up there. 11% are in the admin and professional.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
that is
okay.
true.
Okay.
This was all done through a TASB salary study, and this is what our district turned into TASB, and these are the percentages they came back with. But then I took it a little bit further when I was calculating the raises, and I was able to pull each one out of each bucket and just to compare it to what TASB had, and they pretty well had within two employees of exacts. So yes.
So just one last on this part. The admin and professional is just who again, everybody?
Okay, so it would be all directors, coordinators, diags, counselors, principals, APs, administration here in this building. I'm sure there are some, actually, our transportation director, our executive director of maintenance, all of those type people would be considered administrative professional. A lot of our technology folks are administrative professional as well.
So some in the campuses and some here and throughout the district?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. You mind going to the next?
And I'm sorry, I talk really fast.
You do, it's all right. Actually, to where the money break, or the number of people we had in each of those and the numbers, that one, I think, yeah. How much, because I'm just looking at how much it cost us for each of these.
Sure. And then the packet that went out, I had in there a column that says what a 1.5% would be for this and what a 2% would be for that as well, and the benefits plan, so that you could really kind of see that.
Yeah, I want to draw attention to that next slide. The inflationary costs are 3 times our staff increases. When you talk about sustainability, do you expect that to be the new number, or do you expect those to come down?
I do not expect those to come down.
Yeah,
No,
'cause gas
sir.
hadn't come down really, has it?
No. And the thing about it is they've been rapidly increasing over the last several years. And our last increase from the state was in 2019. And I think the most inflationary cost we've received is from 2019 till now. So those are real numbers that school districts are seeing.
It's things that we can't control.
No, sir, we can't.
And I don't expect you to know the answer, but do y'all have a sense of how many school districts are running deficit this year? Because I know this is the first time in a long while that we've had to run anywhere close to a deficit. Do you know
I
how?
don't have a number. TASB or TASA hasn't put anything out. I'm sure they will once all the budgets are done. By the middle of September, we'll probably hear it at the TASA TASB conference. I was at a conference, I believe it was the Midwinter Conference in January. There were probably 120 superintendents in the room. I would say 85% raised their hand that they were passing a deficit budget, expected to pass one this year, and over 70% of those, it was the first time that their district had passed a deficit budget.
I had heard 75% of districts. I just don't know if it's documented. And then I'd like to point out, also for the record, we're talking about a 2% raise, and the state gave themselves a 5% raise. But we get no new revenue. So you were nodding, just for my education, have we run a deficit this large?
No, not this large. We've passed deficit budgets before, but generally speaking, at the end of the fiscal year, it's kind of evened itself out. I think there's one example, like if you look at the 1 year where we did have a budget deficit, probably, 20.
COVID, yeah.
Including this current one, though.
Yeah.
And at my previous district, I took my peer districts and I looked at all, kind of snitched on their websites to find out if they had a deficit budget or not. And there were over 80% of them that had a deficit budget the previous year. I think there were only 2 out of all of them that actually had a flat budget.
I think for me, what's important is that it's stuff we can control, and I think it's a tight budget for things we can control. We can't control inflation. We can't control gas prices. We can't control the state getting a pay raise but not giving us new revenue.
Can you elaborate more on if we go to a 10-month budget, and you said that would kind of help us?
Yes, so a 10-month budget's going to lay out a little bit different. So we're going to adopt a 10-month budget this year. That means we're going to receive all of our funding for our students in the first 10 months. However, we have teachers that are accrued because they start in the month of August. We're going to get that accrual back on that budget. And then all of our 11-month contracts, we get a month of savings there, and our 12-month contracts, we get 2 months of savings. And so there's also some savings in just day-to-day of utilities, the property and insurance cost, and other things like that that'll make up the savings. So that one 10-month program, we're going to be able to put that money into fund balance. So when we close this 10-month, we're going to put money in fund balance.
And I think it was 5% of the staff or teachers is over 30 years. Is that right? That was on there. So Chrissy, you make up 5%? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
So,
Sorry, I'm flipping through these.
could you slowly go back? Okay. Then forward. I'm trying to remember the particular slides.
Which slide are you looking for?
Well, there was one that, and I think it's related to the 10-month versus 12-month budget and related to my fear of numbers. But there's a $4 million estimated expense over revenue on the 12-month basis there. And then there's another slide towards the end that showed a $6 million, or yeah.
Because this includes the compensation increase and the
Okay.
other one does not.
That's what I was, yeah. And so that, let's say we did that 6.3 million. What would that do to our fund balance?
Okay, so I kind of looked at those numbers because I was looking at a 3-month. And what we anticipate this year is to decrease about $1.5 million. That's what she's feeling, Amy feels is going as a deficit this year. And so if we decrease that, it'll be about 37 million. So that's going to drop us a little bit more if we were to do a 12-month budget, less than the 3 months. And so, but we're doing a 10-month budget.
Okay, so, but using a 12-month still, then
Yes.
that would take us down to 32 million-ish?
Yes,
Would that give us the 3 months of
No, sir, it
operating?
will not.
Okay.
Will be a couple $100,000 of doing that if we were to do the 2%. So I feel like you said earlier, I think we could make up the difference, and so we'll kind of be flat. But then when we move into the next school year, we're gonna have to really look at everything. So we'll start our budget process basically once this one's adopted for the next school year.
So basically, at the end of next year, you're not going to see the deficit because of 10 months. We'll actually put money back into fund balance. But then the rub will be what takes place during the legislative session in 25. What does it do with funding? Because without additional funding, you're at roughly that $6.2 million deficit without any raises for 26, 27. That would be on top of that if the state did absolutely nothing.
And I think we're using the wrong term. It's not a raise. It's marginally a cost of living increase. Because I think cost of living is generally considered 3%, and we're not even debating cost of living increase. And then it just, again, just editorializing. We're a public entity. It's public service, constitutionally obligated. We can't go sell more cheeseburgers to increase revenue. Oh, and by the way, we can't gain new revenue with the increase in our tax base. So I commend you. It's a zero-sum game. You've done a great job tightening where you can. I know people get scared when they hear deficit, but it's really stuff that's out of our hands, in my opinion.
You know, the other part that we hadn't talked about is very nominal student growth. You know, we've talked about the numbers, roughly 1,100 students live in our school district that do not attend our school district. If you took 300 of those kids and they came back here, budget looks totally different because now you've got the growth of kids. That's the rub. You know, if you're growing, the formula usually works in your favor. If you're not, but, you know, we have nominal growth, but we have kids that actually live here that have chosen, you know, since COVID not to come through our doors yet.
We also don't get credit for the ones that are not in the average daily attendance compared to enrollment.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on all that, I mean, I should have started with the comment that we are in this tight position and talking about, I mean, probably our greatest ever deficit budget because of where the state has put us. I mean, like I said last time, if you just kept up with the state's inflation numbers, that we would have $1,360 more per student, and that would equate to close to $20 million over, you know, so it would be significant, and that's just, you know, meeting inflation. So that said, the part that, and I don't know if you're getting to this, the kind of why you're asking this, it's not this year. Going to this 10-month is going to really help us get through this year. It's really it's the next year, right? And how do we manage that? And obviously, we have we're going to be making some cuts, right, to help balance out some of that huge inflation numbers. But I don't know, $6 million is a lot to know that you're going to be facing something the next year, right? I think that's what we're have to struggle with.
So there are other I think what you're trying to say is there's other elected officials you can email and reach out to besides us.
Yes, thank you. It's not us. And honestly, I will say at that same meeting, and nobody better quote me out of context here, but at the same meeting where they gave us those numbers about the 1360, they also said if we really wanted to get our people's attention about the elected officials that control this, we wouldn't give anybody a raise because then we could get everybody upset. But I'm not saying that that's what I'm suggesting, but that's was mentioned. He meant not just us, across the whole state and school districts. We don't control this was the point.
Okay, so our next steps, of course, we're going to do the compensation plan. Then we're going to go back and look at those budgets and start switching out employees and auditing our payroll just to make sure that we've accounted for 100% of our staff and there's not any savings that we can account for there. Then on the 25th, we get our certified values. That'll kind of help us set our tax rate. Then we turn in our maximum compressed tax rate to TEA. They approve the Tier 1 funding. And then we'll put that advertisement in the paper on August 9th, and then we'll bring a budget to you guys for approval, a tax rate and budget on the 20th of August. Are there any further questions? All right, thank you. Sorry, I'm learning.
That'll bring us to item 2, consideration and discussion regarding Texas Association of School Boards Policy Update 123. Ms. Hester.
So update 123 is smaller than the ones that have been along the legislature changes from the last legislative. We finally caught up to that. So next year they'll mess with us some more. But the The legal policies they're based on the legislative and the regulatory changes. Few of the legal policies, there's a couple, and those we don't get to vote on. Then there's a couple of local policies that are being updated, conflict of interest disclosures, economic development, emergency plans, other types of employment contracts, homebound instructions, and instructional resources and library materials. So anybody have any questions about those? That was easy. Thanks. You'll vote on it at the next board meeting.
To item E, we will adjourn.